Hey guys, this is impOSCar 3 by GForce Software, everything you just heard, and it is incredible. And tonight we're going to be checking out first the presets so you guys can hear some of the new stuff in impOSCar 3, as well as doing a lot of sound design. And the super cool feature for impOSCar 3 is we've now got a whole wavetable editor in here. So it's craziness, it's awesomeness, and I can't wait to do it. I'm Vulture Culture. We do a stream here every Wednesday night at 9. So if this is your type of thing, please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell so you can get notified of when I go live. Why don't we go check out some presets? And I want to point that out. That was with no effects other than what it comes with. So I used this blissed out patch as the starting point to the track. And immediately you get those wonderful, giant, just incredible sounding effects that you get from GForce. Let's move on over to Wasp Killer. This was the bass line of the song. I modified it a bit because what's actually going on in this patch is it's using a high pass here. So you can hear. So I modified it to a low pass. And that is just a little taste of what we'll hear as we get into some of the sound design stuff. Aquatic Borealis, how's it going, my friend? Thinking about you. This is just absolutely beautiful. So yes, I do know, DeCarmick, that the Oscar or the Peak uses the same type of filters as the Oscar. I don't know if it was actually the same guy who designed it. I don't know. I used this arpeggiator in here. Gorgeous, and you can see that this patch was created by Dave Spears, the founder of GForce. Frosted Romance. And this gives away the wavetables that we're going to be checking out later on the stream. For me, this is so exciting because it's the first time I've had software that really gives me the sound of the Quai K3, one of my favorite vintage synthesizers. Definitely has that character to it as well. This one's called Imagine Large. Highlighting the chord mode that is in impOSCar 3, we've got High Rise. The V analog was an anorexic in his sumo costume. Fleur de Peau 5th. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Interesting LFO movement in there. We have two different LFOs, and they can be doing this sort of blend thing where you can control the filter with both of them and all sorts of stuff. Love, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yes, you could definitely get some awesome PWM industrial stuff in here. Frosted Romance just made me buy impOSCar 3. People always ask, do you have like an affiliate link or something? I don't. I just hope that when GForce watches this stream, they go, okay, this guy's not messing around. That's gangster. Base Station 2 as well. Zap, welcome to the stream. It's my choice to replace a CS30, and it's great. CS30 is one of those synths I've always wanted to get my hands on. Probably one of the next purchases if I can get it. Are super great, Machine Storm. I'm hoping to check out some more of this. Talk about some great sounds. I use this sound, Age of Pop, as the basis of the pads in the chorus of this song I did. Right there. Autumn, welcome to the stream. How's it going? D50 adjacent for sure. Aspects of this sound better for sure. The effects and everything. And then, of course, I just love the inherent timbre of the D50. Aqua Rhythm. There's one of those sounds in here. Craziness. I'm doing quite well. Blessed and highly favored. How are you doing, Autumn? Wow, that is a lot of reverb on this. Arrival. Very cool droney type thing. I wonder if down low. Little aftertouch action there. So we'll play a few more of these. I don't want to spend too much time actually checking out the presets because I want to spend a lot of time doing sound design with this. Just so exciting. Ascension. So this plugin is very exciting to me. Of course, I love recreations of vintage analog synthesizers, right? But where this plugin excites me is where it gets into that vintage digital hybrid category that's sort of missing from the market when it comes to recreations of synthesizers. Orongo. Canada Chuggers. I'm assuming this is for Aquatic's favorite Boards of Canada. Maybe. Canyonlands. Kind of ice fieldsy. Very beautiful. Cassette degradation was a really cool patch I checked out before the stream. Oh, that's hilarious, Dubstation. That goes to show what I know. Paul says, I bet you could do a perfect recreation of Fantasia on this. I don't know that I can do a perfect recreation of Fantasia, period. Feel like an interesting little delay. It doesn't jump right in. Cerulean. Using probably a little bit of key tracking, a high pass filter, chord repeater. Interesting. So we won't play all of these, obviously. character. So cool. Daft voice. We'll just try a couple more. Gabe, we are checking out impOSCar 3, the brand new software synth from GForce. Came out yesterday. Really exciting. So why don't we jump on in at this point and get into some of the sound design stuff? Because, oh, the Canadian Film Board shorts. That makes sense. Scottish. Got it. Goes to show what I know. So anyways, when it comes to the synthesizer, I actually find it to be slightly hard to follow because I've never owned an Oscar. So it's based off of the famous British synthesizer. When we pull up the default patch, the first thing you'll notice is that the sound of it is actually kind of interesting in the sense that it's got this really tight 2 oscillator sound. No detune really whatsoever, which I was surprised by because it's a little bit almost, I don't know what the phrase would be. Everything that GForce does always sounds so analog. So I was surprised that there wasn't a little bit more drift in the sound, because if I play a note that is very locked in, so we have to add a little detune. Aquatic, I did see the Polybrute 12, and I am very excited about. I mean, that is probably the most like modern synth that I'd be excited to maybe one day own. It was so cool. So on its own, I don't know if I would say it's like the greatest sound, to be honest. When you just start with this, got to add a little bit of open up the filter a bit. We do have analog drifting in the detune, or it's got that sound, but I think probably just because I heard Behringer Vintage last week, that I was just a little triggered by that type of sound, where it is a lot cleaner than GForce's Oberheim products, which certainly you can hear the pitch of those oscillators drift in and out of tune. But really the fun gets in when we start adding some detune here. To my ears, it almost sounds more like digitally controlled analog oscillators, you know, where it's got that, you know, super tight tune to it. The butthole puckers ever so slightly for a neuron. Yes, I see that as well. So why don't we check out the filter real quick? So I'm going to do just some quick filter sweeps. Let's add some resonance to it. And I think that's where you can hear the quality of this plugin is in the filter drive feeling. I'm going to bring the drive back a little. So even with the Q only at 50% of the way, it's pretty shrieking. So I'm going to bring the volume down a bit. And so yeah, you can't pull the drive out all the way, right? Esteban, welcome to the stream. So it's a real dirty sound. I don't know why. I mean, even at 50%, that's already as much resonance as I ever add. Let's do 100% for the hell of it. Yeah, so it gets crazy quick, and even at a low resonance setting, It's got a lot of character, the interaction between the filter and the drive. Let's go ahead and check out a couple more of the filters. So we've got, you can always hit the little triangle here to pull up a menu. You'll notice that we actually have low pass, band pass, high pass, 2-pole versions of that. So I'm presuming that the version we just heard was a 4-pole. And then we have these combo filters. So let's just go through these real quick. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Curious if I bring this down to like 70, 80 hertz, and if I boost the Q. Let's drop this down an octave. You can actually get a boost in the low end off of it, so that's good. Low pass 2-pole. Oh, does the OSCAR have digital oscillators? I thought it had analog oscillators. Or are they digitally controlled analog oscillators? By the way, welcome, Ted. But what's really exciting are these low pass, band pass filter combos. So now we're running through 2 filters. Which to my ears is such a cool characteristic sound that's different than what I'm used to hearing, but you know, it's got that GForce magic to it, a little bit of that flavor. Low pass and high pass. So it's different than a notch. I wonder if we take the resonance all the way out. Don't really hear too much because of the crossover, so it's not quite a notch. Band pass and high pass. You absolutely get this interesting thing that's happening where, I don't know if you guys can hear the difference in the low end. Like where you can hear a little bit of slop between the filters, I think, where they're not perfect, and that adds to that character. So those are the filters. And it definitely has a lot of balls. Now, what I'm excited for, first off, the oscillator balance. It took me a while to find it, but it's right over here. So we want to listen to just one oscillator at a time. We'll start with that. We put the mix all the way to the left, and we can check out all of the oscillators. So little ring in there. You guys hear that? I wonder what that is. We got a square wave. You'll notice that the pulse width position doesn't do anything on square wave, but it does on pulse. You guys hear that little ring up there? It's like a real high little, I don't know what that is. I don't notice it until I crank the Q. I don't know if that's a little aliasing. Right around 6,000 or so, you can really pull that out. Anyways, can't go through 0. We got pulse width modulation. By the way, cheers, guys. Can I get a little scum cheers in the chat? I've got a little Tullamore Dew here with me tonight, but it could be whatever you guys are drinking. I just always like to say thank you to everybody who makes every Wednesday night here on YouTube freaking amazing. So thank you very much. I love this little synth community that we have. So cheers. So we've got some very nice pulse width modulation. We can blend that in, and with a little detune. Lots of thickness. Nobody's surprised by GForce doing that well. We've got full organ, which is interesting. Can I get some scum organs in the chat? Harpsichord. Is this something in the original Oscar, or am I missing something? I don't know. We've got strong lead. Reminds me of the saxophone wavetables in something like a DW8000. It's pretty cool. Double pulse. So no pulse width movement there. Gritty. You know what synthesizer has waveforms like this? Is actually the Ensoniq SQ80. It has a bunch of waveforms that are like these sort of weird spectral things, but they're like less sharp than they are in the D50. So, yeah, Parbs, welcome, welcome. Yeah, the Polybrute 12 is definitely the spiritual successor to the Andromeda. I hear you there. And then we have Wavetable Edit. So this will just be a sine wave. Now, I understand why impOSCar and why GForce says it's a wavetable synth, right? Because people like wavetables. The kids like wavetables, right? But really, when I look at this, although we do have a wavetable and we've got a few different ways to interact with it, my eyes immediately go to this down here, which is our wonderful set of all of the harmonics we can pull up, all of the partials to be able to do additive synthesis. And that's what's super exciting to me, because again, like I said, I love the Kawai K3, and I just think this is a wonderful way to get that type of sound into software, because unless you have a Kawai K3, it basically there's no way to get there. So the way this works is we have our fundamental on the far left, and then we can control which partials are being used. So if we start with a high fundamental and kind of do a shape like this, we'll get something that looks more or less like a sawtooth wave. See how that sounds close to a sawtooth? I mean, it's a little janky, right? Maybe I need to put a little bit more in here to get a little closer to a sawtooth. I think I've made it a little too sinusoidal. But that is like that for sure. Jim, welcome to the stream. Now works on with all Windows audio drivers, not just ASIO, and the new programming is inspired as well. Mellowash is still my favorite program. I'll have to check that out. Jordan, welcome. I'm having a coffee. Tim Kibb's getting crazy with those newfangled wavetables. Yes. So cheers, guys. Gerald, welcome to the stream. Oral Escape, welcome. Hey, thank you very much for the tip the other day. I really appreciate that. Yes, with the drawing, with the hand drawing on the wave screen. So anyways, we can get much more complicated sounds than just your typical sort of sawtoothy type thing. You can see that we get this sort of, this is like a mangled, like almost like an FM sine wave. Really fun sorts of sounds, but it gets really fun when you just start pulling out some harmonics and get these weird sonic holes in it that you wouldn't get from normal analog synthesis. And this is additive, has a tendency to sound like FM because of the ability to be able to get some high-end stuff. So if I crank some high-end, talk about a just crazy sound. And now what I want to do is actually pull the harmonic all the way out of this. And you'll see why. Seem to be losing a lot of the sound as it goes up high. Dubstation Zero says, well, Ted says, did you mention the Ensoniq SQ80? Yes, absolutely. So that's definitely in this neighborhood. Dubstation says the sound process OS for the Mirage has additive partials you can stack. Just finished restoring one, determined to learn the sound process OS this time. You're brave, because the Ensoniq Mirage is not easy to get into. You know, that was the biggest reason I sold mine, was just because it's not an obvious thing to be able to get in and tweak the little stuff. So this is okay, but I want to make sure I get the high end through. Okay, so what I've done is I've created this really sort of really metallic. Let's give a little more high end in here. Yeah, something like that. Now we can select the second wavetable, which is just a sawtooth wave, and you can see this is this sawtooth wave shape. Right? We've got all of the partials we could use, but let's bring this down so we get more, especially in the mid-range here. I want to suck out some of that shape and get kind of this fat. Kind of honky type of sound to it. Now, before I was noticing, okay, so you could do this with oscillator 2 as well, right? But what we could also do is just grab oscillator 1. So if I press this get oscillator 1 button, it pulls over what we've edited over here. And then as we move between, how do we do that here? Oh yeah, here, the wavetable position, you can see us move between these two waves, right? So I think you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm going from a really thin sound, right, all the way to in the middle, and then really fat at the end. And the idea with this is that now that we can bring the oscillator bounce up, we've already got a little detune built in. So what we have is now these two detuned additive oscillators, right? Which in and of itself is cool. And then if I bring it back, this is more of like a Quai K3 type sound. What I'm trying to do is create a little electric piano sound using additive synthesis and the wavetable position knob. So you might look around, and I spent quite a while trying to find a motherfucking envelope that I could use to modulate this wavetable position, almost to the point of me being like, oh God, like I'm not gonna be able to do it, right? It's just not possible. Oh, I had the pulse width there. So what I found was, see how this is routed to LFO1, right? Makes sense so far? LFO1 can be all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, look at these shapes. That's a lot of fun to check out, but you can also just route the filter envelope over there. And now that gives us the ability to, how do we get? Which of the two of these is it? Is it this one? Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, we want to go the opposite direction. So here's how we get it. So we can control. So we're starting with that sort of really thin sound. Maybe we won't even go all the way. I'm already starting to feel like we haven't really used almost any of the synthesizer. Right now, we've just used the additive synths and the wavetable position and modulated with the filter envelope. And it sounds so fat already. So then, of course, if we want to kind of take this further, we can use the low pass filter, bring this down. We can shift one of the wavetables up an octave. We're going to tighten that tuning up a bit, I think, somewhere. Right, sounds pretty good. So far we can add a little resonance. And that's sounding really beautiful and modern and bright. And just bring the cutoff down if we want to make it sound more vintage, right? The thickness is crazy. We can bring in some chorus. We could also get width out of using unison mode, so we could put it into poly for voice and then get this sort of thing. If you want to go that way, for me, I'm going to turn the unison off and just use the chorus because I like doing things the old school, kind of more analog workflow. It sort of reminds me, I think on mode 2 here. Yeah, mode 1. Reminds me a lot, actually, of the chorus of the Kwai K3. Just really, really gorgeous sounding. Why don't we add some delay, right? I don't want to hear those little tine sounds, so I'm going to filter out some of the high end, right? If it's getting too thick, we can filter out some of the low end as well, right? And here is where, and we can turn like some control. So right now the lengths are locked. I believe we can unlink them so we can get different amounts. So we can get more of a stereo thing going on. Sounds really good. And why don't we add some reverb in here? So with the mix all the way up, we get a really tight sound. Of course, we got these wonderful presets. Start to get crazy. Death by Media, how's it going, my friend? Yeah, I haven't. I might just not be seeing it, but I'm not seeing like you said, the Xmod XLFO or a vintage knob, right? Yeah, it's definitely kind of sticking to impOSCar's DNA a little bit more, and I think what's really the big selling point on this is going to be this new wavetable editor that we're using for this particular sound. Funny. Yeah, so just using some effects, real simple stuff with the filter, we're able to create all sorts of sound. Of course, we could control the filter frequency with a little bit of velocity. Turn that down a little. So it's a little like things are all over the place. For instance, aftertouch is over here, mod wheel destination's over here, but velocity expression is here. We've got pan spread, which I'm assuming will move the oscillators around. Oh, that's like, oh, that's interesting. We've got, like, left puts the bass note over there so that you've got that sort of sound, but we could alternate. I love randomness. Again, just adding more to that sound. And another thing about these destinations, right, is looking over here in the aftertouch section, we could add a little bit to the filter frequency. So why don't we don't need much. I don't know why I'm not hearing anything. Let me see what I'm doing wrong here. Filter frequency. Not hearing anything. But not the filter frequency. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. It's letting me bring the filter down, but not up. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Maybe it's a little bug. I'm not sure. We can control the wavetable position and stuff with aftertouch. So, for instance, now thinning the sound back out. We can control that decay is a little crazy. All sorts of stuff. LFO rate, pitch LFO amount. So for instance, that's probably what I would want to do. Actually, let me make sure I put the wavetable position here. Neutralize that again. Now going to pitch LFO amount and increasing that a bit. Getting anything from that, but I don't know if it's because I haven't assigned an LFO to the pitch of the thing. I don't know. So the layout of the synth is, I don't know if it's for anybody else, but it is a little bit confusing. Things are just all over the place. So that's definitely a thing. I don't know if anybody sees what I'm doing wrong there. Death by Me, it says that the filter is still gnarly. I'll probably upgrade for the modern patch browser and the GUI that works. So I had some quirks on Mac for a few years. Another thing is we got ring modulation, so we could kick that on. And so here's the sound without ring mod. So we could just, you know, have a bass line. I'll bring down the reverb a bit so we can hear. Right, there's how that sounds, but that's with half, right? Let's put it on full. Get that really kind of cool sound. Sounds super cool. It's difficult to make a bad sound, although I'm sure I'm capable of it because I'm pretty capable of all sorts of stuff. So why don't you guys ask me, actually, I wouldn't mind a little help coming up with ideas for what types of sounds you'd like to see me try to make in impOSCar. So I know the types of sounds I like to make, which are going to be these big poly sounds that have a little vintage digital character to them, but also sort of like an analog warmth to them. But it's probably much more interesting if you guys shout out in the chat some of the stuff that you'd like to try for me to make. Blade Runner sounds, just make an organ. Okay, so I can do both of those things very quickly. So we're just going to go to full organ and bring the mix to the left, and organ sound is done. Check mark. Blade Runner sounds, of course, we could do the ye old Blade Runner sound here. So what is it? Right, so there's that. We just need some release. Control the filter. I'd be happy to try to do a bell pad, even something Fantasia adjacent. The trick is finding that perfect cutoff. So that's kind of close, and then all you need is a huge amount of reverb. And it's got to be dark. Got to be dark because the Lexicon 224 is a very dark sounding thing. Probably too much decay. So that's the Blade Runner brass sound. So we could go ahead and check that off the list too. Next up, Paul said bell pads. I see dark bass. Sample and hold sequence patch would be really cool on this, or bass. This saw sounds very close to my Wasp, more so than version 2 did. So that's super cool. Ambient Machine, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Cheers to everybody out there. I've got to continue to drink whiskey or else I'm not going to make it through the stream without shaking. Appreciate it, Gabe. So again, if we want to do something bell-like, that's going to take us into that wavetable territory. So let me just make sure. So we're going to start with the oscillator mix all the way on the left, and we're going to try to come up with some bell-style sounds here. So another way that we can interact with this wavetable editor is you'll see we have these sounds on the right here. And so we have sine selected. So if I click here, we have like these different quadrants, and we can move kind of like these puzzle pieces around. So we could maybe put a square over here and see what this sounds like. So this is like partially a sine, partially. That's kind of how we could get a pulsy type thing. But we could also use randomness, right? So, and it does change every time. So you'll notice if we have more content up top, we get a really thin sound. But if we go low, so we get that sort of a thing. What are some other ways that we can interact? We can get just, if we want to create sawtooth. has an interesting sort of what is the word I'm looking for? Saxophone. That's a word. Reed instrument sort of character. We have all sorts of like circle shapes. So if you want to see, that's kind of like a more analog sounding, really, really, really fat sawtooth wave. So there's all sorts of things we could do. We even have an eraser, which is interesting. Oh, so that just gets rid of that. We can have pure silence that way. If we just have noise, and then maybe in this down category, we'll do like a little swoop. And again, now if we hit 3D, we can actually see how this looks, and that's kind of fucking wild. But we can continue to get more of a bell tone by bringing in these really high partials. That's a big part of that Fantasia bell. Yeah, that's a very crazy thing. What if we move into spectral mode? I don't know what that does. What the difference is there? Oh, okay, so this just crossfades. This does like a spectral morph mode. So it does actually change the character. In this case, I definitely want to leave it on spectral mode because I want all of those craziness. Adapt, manipulate. Welcome to the stream. How's it going? So that's kind of our starting kind of bell. There we go. I want some like really harsh, terrible, almost like ear cancer type sounds, which might sound bad at first, but the truth is we sort of need that to be able to get there with the sound. So if we then move the wavetable position all the way over here, we can see, oh wait, did I just, no, good. We can then draw in something like a little neutral. So we can draw that. I don't know, maybe we want a little sinusoidal. Yeah, I think we want like a little sine wavy thing. Gabe says, Desert Island Soft Synth, this versus Omnisphere. I'm really excited to be checking out impOSCar 3. Omnisphere has 60, 90 gigs of sample. Like, you can't really compare the two. This is incredible. Omnisphere would definitely be my forever Desert Island synth. I would always feel like I could make music with that. Even with all of these vintage synths that I love back here, they all have like their particular flavor. They can't do everything. And of course, Omnisphere can't do all of the vintage analog sounds as well as these can, but it gets close enough. So yes, cheers for Chris. Can I get a cheers in the chat for everybody? Cheers. So yeah, we're going to try to do the same thing where we're going to use LFO1 and we're going to use the filter envelope to I think what we need to do in the wavetable editor here is just add some noise up here. to sort of change the character of it, let's see, something like that. We need to be able to push this up high. Get those, because down here it gets really gnarly. So I see we can change the octave shift of oscillator 2. Oh, here we go. So let's drop oscillator 2 way down. Okay, so the only problem I'm having with this now is it's so loud. I want to be able to hear it just like nothing. Why am I hearing anything? I feel confused. Oh, because I'm on oscillator 2, that's why. So over here again. Let's see what happens if we just use that. Let's just go straight from there. There we go. Maybe we want to do the opposite. Maybe we want to drop the octave and then bring this up a couple octaves. This is going to be going into like really gritty bell territory. I would love to be able to turn off key tracking for oscillator 1. So if anybody knows how to do that, please shout it out if you see it anywhere. But that's like a trick you could use in the D50 to be able to create these sounds. So anyways, one of the tricks is going to be just to add a lot of reverb. Bring the filter down. We don't need it to have as much size. We want that really, again, it's a little bit almost like ear cancer, but that's what we want. And then the other part of something like a pulse width modulation or a Fantasia sound is pulse width modulation. Now I wonder what causes, if it's the rate of one of these. Do you guys know what causes the rate change? I'm curious. It doesn't sound bad, right? All right, so now the next trick is going to be to bring the filter down. And then maybe even using one of these exotic filters. I think I like this one. Just trying to tune that in. Right, so it's getting that sort of wide octave sound. Let's put some drive. Drive is helping the like the compression of the thing. Let's add some delay in. Doesn't it seem like the low pass filter's not doing anything? I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. We're really off the topic of bells. I was curious if I could do it, but we've kind of gone into some sort of other dark territory. I don't know if you guys can see if I'm doing something wrong. It seems like the delay's not doing anything here. Let's turn it off and turn it back on. The low pass filter's not doing anything with the delay. I don't know if I'm missing something. Something really cool. Playing it up an octave. Maybe we need to separate them by even another octave. Right is definitely helping. So let's see, can we modulate the pitch of oscillator 2? Let's see, how do we do that? Modulation, no. Glide. Maybe we have to use the mod wheel for that? Is that the only way to do that? Destination, oscillator 2 pitch, LFO amount. There we go. Increase the depth here. Resonance of the filter, you get a lot more brightness. Versus this, right? This is a pretty dark sort of sound, almost Chorgam 1 levels of dark. If I add a bit though, man, that is just, it's like dirty. It is a dirty synth. It is like the dirtiest Fantasia style patch. I don't know what I'm doing. messed around there. So what I was trying to do is tune that wavetable. Mistakes, welcome to the stream. How's it going? So yeah, this is really not Fantasia at all, but it's not bad. Try unison mode. Let's see what we got. It does sound better with unison. I really can't speak to that. Sound. Can I save this? Let's see here. Is there a save button in this motherfucker? Just because it's so fascinating. I guess I just save it to my DAW. We'll call this not Fantasia. But it is cool. If the eyeball vendor, oh, what's his name? Chew. His name's Chew, right? Eyeball vendor from, yeah, for sure. Spaz, have a great night, Autumn, okay? Muay Thai, gotta love it. Gotta get that recovery in. Bells need a lot of ring mod. That makes so much gosh darn sense. I don't know why it took me that long to get there. Oh, interesting, it doesn't really get there. Let's try half. I think that did help. Let's see how that compares. Yeah, half is really nice. It's definitely Blade Runner E. You got to be careful with this filter on the reverb. So freaking interesting. Just save that again. It's not Fantasia, just because what an interesting sound. We'll probably use that for something. Oh yeah, we could do all sorts of stuff with the LFO shape. It could be, you could go into the Wavetable Editor here and go to LFO 2, and right now we got a triangle wave, but like, we can edit that to be all sorts of stuff. So, you know, affecting the pitch there, we could have it do sort of like a weirder shape. Right now it's not doing much, but if I do a little bit more pitch mod. Oh wait, it was over here. Right, we could take it into some weird territory. Yeah. David Smith, I really appreciate it, man. Yeah, Fantasia post-nuke edit. So, yeah, maybe not my best Fantasia style patch, but, you know, whoever said it in the chat earlier that this synth takes you in a different direction than you thought you were going, we ended up with something super unique, something super cool that I could definitely use, but not what I was expecting, surprisingly. So people wanted to hear, Taran asks, can you do more than 4 points in the wavetable? That's actually a good question. You certainly can when you're in the oscillators, right? Looking at the LFOs, yes, I think you can double click to add. Yeah, so you could just keep adding more and more in here if you want to get something interesting. And maybe we'll use that So I'm going to initialize again, just in case we use that. So any thoughts on the upcoming PWM Mantis? I'm pretty excited. Adapt Manipulate says, I own a Peak, which he was involved in designing in. I definitely think the Mantis is a super cool synth. Duophonic, right? So for me, I think Dubstation Zero says it best. The mono synth thing, I do have some monos behind me here, vintage ones, but I have trouble getting into mono synths because I do think modular might be the way I'd want to go with that. But I love polysynths. I just like big muscle car synths too. But PWM Mantis, and especially because it does have patch points and stuff, right? So you can integrate it, and I think you can spit all of the different oscillators out, and you've got the high pass, band pass, low pass, all of that, right? Am I correct about that, Adapt? Death by Media? Let me know. So anyways, someone was saying bass. So why don't we create some crazy bassline shenanigans, right? Let's go into the wavetable edit. And what we need to do is add some sawtooth action here, and then just get... We're going to create some of these more serum style bassline sounds. And then going to the second here, we can go in and... Right, so now we can create a kind of a growl. Yeah, that sounds good. Right, so that's going to be the basis. Let's go over to, and I love that they, for the longest time I was going up here to change the mix between the oscillators, but we could just do that directly from the wavetable editor. So now we can listen over here. We're going to do something similar, some sort of, you know, oh, I need to move this over to wavetable. This. So what we've really got are some really crazy, yeah, it definitely has that MS-20 type thing. Adapt says, I own the Malevolent. Incredible. One of my favorite analogs. It's also like $500, which is crazy. I definitely agree with you. I'm excited to see what else comes from them. So now we have two separate oscillators. And we can go from like really kind of dark and fat to something more interesting. So we're going to use LFO1 to manipulate these, and we'll use LFO2 to manipulate the other one. So we can get some kind of cross-contamination, right? So different rates. Right, that sounds pretty good. Let's increase the drive. So we're already getting some really cool harmonics. So let's go to, I think the low pass band pass sounded really cool. now we're getting this really interesting sort of vowel-y sort of thing. Sounds pretty good, right? Now, I think one of the biggest things is going to be just using detune and the mono mode. Glide spread is wild. So let me see if I can find glide somewhere. If someone sees it, point it out to me. Like just yell out what category. Glide type. Super cool how it like cleans up down when you go up high with that, you know. Chorus does nothing. It's just already so crazy, right? Little attack helps give it that. Let's see if we add some modulation to oscillator 1 wavetable position and so see what happens. Not really doing a lot because of the LFO. I just love how it has such a different sort of feeling to it way up high versus down low. Because down low, it's just pure hatred. And then up high, it's got this. Sort of, yeah, it's almost vowel-y. Isn't that crazy? So really cool sound, actually. So let's see. Is there anything else that we can see that looks like it would be fun? Oh, we can control the separation. I'm not really hearing too much of a difference. Yeah, oh, that's so cool. So for impOSCar 2, it's only $30. So that's super awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna call this one, what do we call this? Not Messiah. And so we've covered some bells, sort of. We covered some Blade Runner. We covered the, you know, a dark bass line sound. Is there anything else that stands out? Any other sounds you guys would like me to try to make? Because to me, it's cool that we could take this synth so far outside of what you get in the factory presets, which of course are going to be kind of in that more, or 30 pounds, sorry, 30 pounds. Yeah, I always get that wrong. My last one, 2 weeks DMX, I said $25 when it's actually 25 pounds. So it's actually, or whatever it was, 20, you know. John Carpenter type sounds. Okay. Let's see. Steel drum. Papadillanellos Azucarados says Korg M1 blows this out of the water, man. That's a take. I don't know. Gabe says, sidebar question, what's your vote for the best synth with both analog and digital oscillators? Nina, I think, with the you know, the Korg log line as being a close second, I think. What's the piano sound like? Damon Descent, welcome to the stream. I guess we could do, if anybody has any ideas for sound design, please shout it out now. Otherwise, I'm going to just try to do kind of like a basic sort of a thing. So why don't we pull up some pulse waves here? Yeah, we'll do pulse waves. And we should be able to control the wavetable mod with LFO1. And right? Am I wrong? Oh, that doesn't control pulse width, so we have to move to pulse width modulation. But I want to know what's the secret to the speed of the pulse width modulation? Is there a rate knob for pulse width modulation? Does anybody know? Oh, let's see here. We've got Obi style big uni brass pad. Well, that's what we're going for. So I just can't seem to find a rate knob for pulse width modulation, although maybe it doesn't matter too much. So one thing is, I don't want too much detune. Little bit of envelope amount, little attack decay. The trick to the sort of Oberheim brass sound is to do kind of 50% on all of them. So you start lower and then only come down 50% of the way. If we want, we can slow the decay down a bit. Don't need a lot of resonance. A little bit of resonance is actually sounding very brassy. What I'm trying to do is not get those highest of frequencies, right? So I'm thinking up around 5K and up, those super bright frequencies. So what do I have, this 44%? So listen to the, see how it never goes quite up? If I add just a little more, you get those super high sizzly frequencies. I like a brass sound that doesn't go quite that. Right around in there keeps it nice and, you know, keeps it sounding vintage, right? That sounds gorgeous. Let's add some more release. Take a little attack off here. Maybe just a little little sustain, kind of following the decay shape here. We'll just bring it down to like 75%. See how that sounds? That opens it and then closes it back, right? So that's that Oberheim thing. Right now it's dead down the center. So why don't we add some panning? We can use random or pseudo-random to be able to get that Oberheim OB8 thing, or all of those synths. You could pan the voices left and right. Maybe not quite as much spread. Death by Media says, yeah, it's very Toto brass, isn't it? Sounds gorgeous. And then we can use, like you said, poly unison. I'm going to bring the volume down because that adds a lot of volume. I wish that poly unison didn't. Okay, I'm going to be honest about this in a second. Let's turn the detune down a little bit. There's the spread up. I mean, it couldn't sound better in terms of like the hugeness. My issue is I think I kind of like it without the unison. I don't need it, To me, I'm just getting more phasing or whatever. And here, I'm still getting that beautiful texture, right? That's what I love. I love the texture of individual oscillators and filters. But if you want to have it, we can turn it back on, and that's there. You guys tell me, which do you prefer? Do you like it with the poly unison on? I mean, what you can say about it for sure is that it has thickness for days, right? To me, it's almost starting to get that dreaded VST sound, right? And I think that's where my ears are at nowadays. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's where my ears are at, where it's like the moment it starts to get too fucking, it almost has that like that sound to it, and I like that little thing there and stuff. Should have added the vintage to offset and a little more variation for the uni patches. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, by the way. I'm just giving my, it sounds amazing. And on a different type of sound, right? Like, so if we went for a very narrow, very tightly tuned bass sound, this is going to sound awesome, right? It's going to sound more like when you put a vintage synth like the Poly 6 or the DW8000 into unison mode and it fires all 6 voices. Chris wants to know, is unison supposed to be doubling the sound? Yes, it is. So it's adding more detune to the sound. And I can definitely hear the difference. It just takes me back to when the first synths could do that. You start getting these like super wide sounds and I mean, it's awesome. It's a beautiful sound, right? But for me, I like it with it off because it's got that character to it, it's got a little bit more character. We can even crank the resonance. Oh my God, it's so gorgeous. No, it needs that attack. Taryn says to add some drive. Let's add some drive. drive is nice, not too much. Just add a little reverb in. Use velocity to control the filter a bit so we can have it just go. So just adding a little of that, now we've got that extra level of expressiveness where if I hit it really hard, we'll get that. But if we play nice and quiet, awesome, Gabe. I'm so happy to hear that. Let's see. Christian says, I love how people argue on the internet. Someone said the synth doesn't sound like the original, and another one saying the opposite. Both said they have had the Oscar. So I don't have an Oscar. I've got a shitload of vintage synthesizers. Someone was saying earlier the Oscar has digital oscillators, so I clearly don't know enough about them. I just always thought it was assumed it was an all analog synthesizer monosynth from Britain, but Crystal Love says, trust me and turn the drive and the volume up all the way. Okay. It's a sound for sure. For me, with this product, especially because of the wavetable editor, what I see here is them doing something very smart, which is they put out a lot of products like their Mini Moog emulation, their Odyssey emulation, their SEM emulation, which are all monosynths, right? And they add modes where you can play more and stuff like that. But you know, in general, it's a monosynth, and so was this originally. And I think by turning it into a polysynth and making it, you know, it's smart for a company to have one product that does additive, right? And maybe one product that can also do FM, right? Things like that, where it helps give you a reason to buy impOSCar above and beyond just being like, oh, I love this particular specific British vintage synth, right? Of course, there's going to be people who are like, that's my favorite vintage synth of all time, and I want that in software. And those people probably already own this, right? But for the rest of us who are like, you know, it's a cool sound, but I'm not very, you know, whatever. I think what's so great about this is that they were like, okay, you know what? How do we spice this up? How do we make this a little sexier? And the answer was by adding in wavetables and turning this into a synthesizer that has the analog character of the Oscar, but also can do wavetable stuff, and honestly kind of took us into that Serum Vital Pigments territory. Death by Media says, very brassy metallic, almost Curtis Electro Music chip like, much like the OBX-A, so it hits the vibe. Yeah, definitely, for me, gets there. This particular one has like that Oberheim OB8 type sound. The OG is more of a Frankenstein than just a hybrid. So yeah, what is the OG? So I was always under the impression it was, you know, Mini Moog adjacent, right? But it sounds like it wasn't. Yeah, probably not a lot left. Yes. Christian says, same happened today with Cherry Audio's new synth, the Rhodes Chroma. In my opinion, if it sounds good, it's good. So here's my one thing about that, Christian. So I to play devil's advocate for a second, since you brought it up, and I'm not trying to say it towards you, just in general. I do have a little bit of a pet peeve because I'm a vintage synth snob. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? When companies put together something and they say it sounds like a vintage synth, and you compare it to the vintage synth and it doesn't sound anything like the vintage synth. A great example of that would be Behringer's Vintage, right? That does not sound like an analog synth. So help me Christ. It's not even close. I can't believe they put the word vintage on it. You know, if anything, it sounds like an access virus. A lot of people made the joke that it sounds like a vintage plugin from 1996, and in that way it does sound vintage. So for me, there is this thing where I do care if a company puts a word and they use the marketing there, right? If they say this is our emulation of a mini Moog, and I get a mini Moog and I play them back to back, they better be close. They don't have to be perfect because not everything's perfect in the world. So far, the closest I've ever heard between a synth I actually own and the software was Tau, their recreation of the Alpha Juno. That was so close that it made me think I could sell the Alpha Juno because it's there in the box. There really was no noticeable difference. Little things with like, you know, just like the filter was a little brighter, but if you brought it down, but essentially that was a Juno. Now I don't have an OSCar. I was going to say I don't have an impOSCar. I don't have an OSCar. I actually don't even have any of the legendary Oberheim synths that they've recreated, right? I've got an Oberheim Matrix 6 right here. So that's a vintage Oberheim, but that's different than what you have. But what I will say is when we did the shootout with Oberheim OBX by GForce Software and the Matrix 6, they were surprisingly close, considering the fact that that's not even emulating the Matrix 6. It's actually emulating a much older synth. It sounded freaking close. So that's why I trust in GForce Software. That stream in particular, if you guys haven't seen it, I'd recommend going back and listening to the GeForce's Oberheim OBX versus an actual vintage Oberheim Matrix 6 stream. That was a really fun one and really eye-opening about A, how great the Matrix 6 sounds, and B, how great GeForce Software's emulations are. So there's that. Let's see here. Death by Media says its oscillators were made out of digital ICs, out of, I believe, a washing machine. Oh my God, that's incredible. So yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So anyways, Christian, I hope you don't feel like I was driving that towards you at all. But it did just bring up a kind of a point or maybe a little bit of a pet peeve that's been bothering me, which is just that I think a lot of companies nowadays, they will slap the look. And I had a company, I'm not going to put their name out, that reached out to me, and I turned down about 50% of the companies that reach out to me to do some sort of live stream or video or even pay me to review their videos. I will turn them down if I don't think I want to support the company. And in this case, it was quite a large company, not going to name names, who sent me an emulation of a thing that I have behind me, and it wasn't even fucking close. And I just thought, and I saw other people's videos going out saying it was a perfect recreation of that. And that really upset me because I'm thinking these guys are profiteering off of this and they're not really putting the effort in, right? They're just, loading in some basic stuff and calling it that just because it has a similar layout. And anyways, I just don't think that's right. So that's my kind of snobism, and I will get off my my soapbox now. So Death by Me says I might be wrong on what machine it came from, but it wasn't DCOs as we know them or single form waves. Also, the noise was from sampling the actual assembly code randomly. That is so crazy. Paul says Softtube's Juno. StarCCar's comparison between Softtube's Juno and a real thing was incredible. How close they nailed it. So I don't have a Juno. I don't have any synth that Softtube's emulated, so I can't say. It wasn't Roland, Death by Media. There's probably a couple of companies that I would say the name of if they were big enough, right? So they're in this interesting place. Yeah, if Roland or Sequential ever tried to pull this move, or Behringer for that matter, tried to pull the wool over your eyes, I would say it out of like, hey, you can't be an industry leader and get away with this shit. No comment on Roland. I mean, I've said a lot about Roland on this channel, and I think they make good stuff. I just have some beef. So here's the thing. That sounds awesome to me. if we put it into 8 voice mode, now it sounds like the rolling cloud. To me, it like takes it into that Roland boutique. See, Alice. Aquatic, I should get a Discord going. I do share stuff on the members only section. I don't do enough there. I should do more. In addition to the discounts you get on my products, I also post stuff there. You guys can see the brand new gear I got today right before the stream, took it out of the box, in the process of setting that up. All right, so I think we could do more, but I think this is actually a good place. I've sort of been rambling for a bit here. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think this is worth adding to the collection? I want to hear what everybody has to say on the topic of impOSCar 3. Is this something, and I mean, be completely honest here, because I think it's important that I'm going to save this patch too. We're going to call this not Oberheim. If you guys want, I'll figure out how to save these patches, and I can probably put them up in the members only section. Do you guys, I think it's important that GeForce gets also honest feedback. So this would be a great moment for you guys to say, hey, you know, here's what I like about it, here's what I don't like. Zozilla the Great, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yeah, so what do you guys think? Terrence says you can save that patch with the down arrow button in the header bar. Oh, of course, duh, it's right there. So obvious. Patch name. We're gonna patch name this not Oberheim. Author Scum Daddy. Notes. That's not even how you spell Oberheim. This is going great. Notes. Turn unison off. Okay, save. User patches. Cool. Let's turn that off and then save it again. Let's save that. Please control click on the save button to quick save. Okay. So control click. Yes. Okay. Oh, we got it. There we go. Control save again. Okay. Yeah, that wasn't that bad, right? Let's see what some of the people just said on here. Venture Northwest says, I was on the fence, but I'm liking the sound now. Hi-Fi 1965. So I only heard the one patch, so maybe. I definitely encourage you to go back to the beginning of the stream where I checked out a bunch of the patches that come built into it, as opposed to the ones that I was making here live. Cathal just got it. Awesome. Ray, the producer, says that the GUI is weird. It's too big or too small. They have it just right with Mini Monster and Oddity. This one needs a refresh. You know, this one for me, out of all of their plugins, I had the most trouble like figuring out where things go, just because but I think that's how the original synth was too, so I understand they kind of had to follow the flow of that. Aquatic says, have to say this plugin sounds pretty good to me, but I like all of GeForce's stuff. I agree. DJ Crystal Love says, fuck yes, I upgraded, I'm really happy with it. Zozilla says, tested it, CPU hit can go crazy. I do think I heard a pop or two, which is insane on my computer. GUI is washed up, not contrasted enough. The wavetable part is great, but overall not that impressed. So that's there. I mean, I don't mind the contrast too much, but I can kind of see what you're saying, but to me it's okay. Death by Me, it says, it's not as much of an upgrade as I have been hoping for. So I don't know about impOSCar 2 because I didn't have it before, but I'm assuming the big difference is the wavetables, right? But for 30 quid in the modern browser UI, I'll take it, but leaving out the vintage and the separate voices offsets is a little what the fuck why. Yeah, you know, especially with their sort of, you know, pedigree emulating the Oberheim stuff and adding that vintage knob. It seems like they could slap a vintage knob right here, don't you think? Adapt Manipulate says, I had the OG plugin way back in the day. I really liked it. The closest most of us will ever get to the real deal. Real unique synth. Rip Chris. Zilla says, check out the V2. The GUI is even better. So that's not a good sign. Paul says, definitely great for classic sounds. You can get crazy stuff out of Pigments, but for classic sounds, this is perfect. Yeah, I don't think this is going to replace Pigments, right? That's a whole different type of thing. This is a very... I love that GeForce makes very narrow focused design, right? We do have some menus in this, right? You know, when you pull up a wavetable, it pulls up that menu. We have, you know, selecting the waveforms, right? That could have been a knob, but, you know, so there's some, but it's very clean, very easy to use. So I like that. I like the fact that they sort of give you one knob per function in a weird way, even though it's virtual. So Taran says, if I was choosing a VST to do analog stuff, I'd still go Diva, although the wavetable part is sick. Yeah, Diva doesn't have any sort of wavetable thing, does it? Aquatic says the UI on GeForce's stuff is a bit nostalgic, maybe awkward. Well, and again, I think that's also just kind of part of this particular synthesizer. Like, if you ever seen one, they're fucking insane to look at. Zilla says the big difference is the wavetable in the browser and reverb. Yeah. So, Ray, the producer, says it's night and day between 2 and 3, more than worth the upgrade, and one I've been waiting for. Zozilla says the big problem is the high expectation after OBX, and I understand. Venture says, interesting on the CPU usage. Yeah, the UI. More of the path logic hurts my brain. I have a couple of GeForce's VSTs, and I love them. And a nice change to my modern synth VSTs. I will say, I think that, you know, GeForce has been kind enough to send me over this as well as other plugins like GeForce's OBX, for instance. And I think for doing the analog thing, I probably still would go to that plugin, right? And then for me, this is all about the vintage digital stuff, because I think using this plugin to get like those Oberheim-y type sounds, I mean, it doesn't really, you know, make sense. Can it do it? Yes. But I will say, I don't know that it does it quite as well, which maybe isn't surprising to anybody. I mean, maybe what I'm saying is so asinine, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, could this be your one-stop shop plugin? Like, if you're going to buy one plugin, could this kind of cover most of your bases aside from anything involving samples, right? I mean, it's not going to sound like a piano or an orchestra. But could it do a lot? And the answer is kind of. I think it's like, it's not everything you could want. And I suppose neither is the OBX plugin. But do you know what I'm saying? I mean, at least with OBX, I'm like, okay, that's covered analog. I'm done worrying about analog with one of their Oberheim plugins. This one is interesting, and I think that trying to create like a bell tone, that was... I would love to have someone better at this plugin show me how to create a really great bell sound. And then look at that and try to like, oh, okay, that's how you do it, you know? So yeah. Deeply Addictive Record says, anytime GeForce eyes closed, I get them. I love that. Aquatic Borealis says, compared to Cherry Audio, who give you a wall of knobs. Right. Yeah, so I should check out Cherry Audio's Chroma and see what I think about it. Zozilla says, Diva is just a pure classic in my opinion. Still to this day, it would be one of my desert island synths, yeah. Itching the Think, welcome to the stream, and you can resize the GUI, absolutely. Yes, and we could control the polyphony. I've got 16 voice polyphony, that's like way over the top. OBE is the GOAT, I agree. The focus button on Cherry Audio synths. So I haven't played it with enough Cherry Audio synths. That's kind of cool. I didn't know that was a thing. Machine Storm says, this and Unify and any other VST equals a powerhouse. One plugin, Spectrasonics Omnisphere, we all know this. Yeah. Sure. It kind of takes the fun out of it, right? You know, Omnisphere is sort of like the Moog 1 of the software world, where it's like, you know, if you had to buy one, right? Is there anything something else can do that the Moog one can't in the analog synth world? Probably not. Quantum and plenty of the hybrid stuff can do all sorts of things, but you know, but who wants to spend all that money? Spectrasonics, $500 is not as expensive as it used to be. Everything costs $500. If you want to fucking buy some chips on your way home, that's like fucking $100 right there, right? UHE is the top of the heap. Death by Mia says, would be an interesting limitation to work around if it's your only synth for sure. You can make some unique music. Yeah, that is absolutely a good point. That what I think is really great about this guy is just the uniqueness is really there. Whereas, you know, a lot of the other analog plugins I've heard, they sound like what you'd expect. This does have a flavor to it, 100%. Zilla says, I did an AB of OBX with the OB8 and I was shocked at how close it is. Yeah, I believe you. Oral Escape says, this reminds me of Elka X in a way. Love to check out Elka X at some point. The Largo, yes. Death by Media, not a fan of Cherry Audio's VSTs except for the SEM, but GForce got that beat. Yeah, I should check out Elka X for sure. Aquatic says, Falcon is very powerful if you want Desert Island. Histake says, Software OBX versus hardware OB8. I'm assuming that's what he means. Be sure to test Zlis Poly KB. Yeah, I should check that out. All right, guys. With that in mind, I think this is a good place to call it for the evening. I hope you found this helpful. Big shout outs to GForce for once again sending me over an incredible piece of software. I know I only scratched the surface, but I hope that, you know, for all y'all out there, you had a good time checking out some sound design and stuff. I think it's important that you guys see me interact with it without me getting like super advanced with it first. So you guys are seeing me interact with it raw for the first time. And I have to say, I'm slightly disappointed with my own sound design skill here, but I think part of that is learning a new synth and, you know, seeing where it takes you, right? And that's the beautiful thing about a synth is I can probably make a half-decent Fantasia patch on a regular synth that has that capacity, you know. This has a very interesting sound. So this sort of took me in a different, little darker, little moodier, you know, the way that the drive, I mean, just the amount of drive in this synth, you know, kind of took it someplace else. Oral Escape says, still getting used to Filterverse. I have shot another video for Filterverse that will be coming out, going really in deep into filters. So that'll be fun. Yeah. So we shall see for sure. Polycobol. Okay, I see what it is. Cheers, guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Paul says, best channel of its kind on YouTube. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Paul. That's very sweet of you to say. I appreciate it very much. I'm trying my best here. So with that, I think I'm going to call it a night. But I just want to say to continue to be excellent, guys, and I will see you in the next video.